Hello witches and demons, and welcome to another exciting episode of Prop House. On today's episode, we're going to be building the Owl Lady's staff, aka Owlbert from the show The Owlhouse. For this build, we'll be using three primary components: the wood staff, the collar piece, and the topper/palisman. For the staff portion, we'll be using a 60-inch wooden broom handle. This can be purchased from online retailers or from your local hardware store. For the collar piece and staff topper or palisman, we'll be using custom 3D printed parts. These parts were printed using a special material known as wood filament. Wood filament is a composite material made up of plastic and wood grain particulate, which is just a fancy way of saying sawdust. With this material, we're able to produce 3D prints that have similar properties and appearance to actual wood. The models for these prints were designed by Manga Monkey. Links to where you can download them will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's hop right into the build. And now we're going to start off with everyone's favorite part, sanding. Next, we're going to be trying a new process, which is wood staining. For wood staining, you need two primary components. The first and most obvious is the stain itself. This can be purchased in a variety of different shades from your local hardware store. The second thing we need is a plain white cloth to apply the stain to our piece. For this, we're going to be using shreds from a cotton t-shirt. You can also use any other just plain white cloth that you might have lying around. Just make sure they're nice and clean so you're not applying any grime or dirt to your piece. Now of course, before we can begin staining, the first thing we need to do is open up the can. This should be a pretty simple process of just taking a screwdriver and prying off the lid. However, after a couple of minutes, I soon realized that this job was going to be a lot harder than it might seem. Using several tools, I tried, but no matter what, I could not get the lid off. Eventually, I was at my wit's end. Finally, thankfully, I was able to get the lid off, and thus we could begin staining. Taking the broom handle outside, we'll start off by staining it a dark brown. For the palisman portion, we're going to apply an initial coat of stain. This is to equalize the colors of the piece and give us a nice base to start with. We are also going to do the same process with the collar piece. With the initial coat now dry, we can move on to the color staining of the collar piece. For the upper portion, we're going to just slightly darken the stain, and for the bottom portion, we'll be coloring it the same color as the wooden broom handle. Before we can begin staining, however, we need to mark off the bottom part with some tape. This is to prevent any of the stain from leaking from one section to the other. With the top portion now dry, we can remove the tape and reapply it to the top so that we can begin staining the bottom. As previously stated, we'll be staining the bottom portion the same dark brown as the broom handle or staff. Leaving the collar piece to dry, we'll move on to the palisman. To start off, we want to tape off the sections that we don't want to stain. For this particular part, that's going to be the face area. With the tape applied, we now want to cut out the two sections that we're going to stain. In this case, it's going to be the two eyes and the beak. Now it's time to start staining the Palisman. So we're going to start off here with the two eyes, the beak, and the middle body, and we'll be using the same stain that we used for the upper portion of the collar. In this case, it's a gunstock wood stain. Now that the collar piece is dry, we'll take off the tape and see how it came out. With the collar piece now complete, the next step is going to be attaching it to the rest of the staff. In order to do this, we're just going to simply slide the collar piece over the top of the staff. You might notice that a little bit of wood sticks out over the top. You're going to want to saw that off to make sure you have a nice flat top. Once that's done, we're then going to fill the empty void space in the top with some glue. With the glue dry and sealing everything together, we can move on to the next step. For the next step, we're going to try something unique and make it so that you can screw the Palisman on and off just like they do in the show. In order to do this, we'll be gluing a screw into the top of the staff. That way, the threads will be able to thread onto a nut which will be affixed in the bottom of the Palisman. In order to attach the screw to the staff, we're going to need to glue the head into the center of the staff. To do this, we're going to drill a hole in the dead center of the top of the staff, big enough to fit the head of the screw. Apply light pressure when you're drilling to make sure you don't drill too deep into the piece. Once the hole is drilled, fill it up with some glue and then place the screw into the center. Make sure that the screw is sitting vertically in the staff, otherwise it might interfere with the screwing operation. While waiting for that to dry, we can move on to finishing the Palisman. We'll be staining the top of the head as well as the two wings, and we'll be staining them the same dark brown as the bottom portion of the collar and the staff. As before, we have taped off the areas that we do not want to be stained. With the stain dry, we can finally remove the tape and see the final product. In order to achieve the screwing operation, we need to glue two nuts into the bottom of the Palisman. In order to do this, we have to print a custom coupler piece. Links to download this piece will be in the description below. With the piece completed, the next step is to glue two nuts into the coupler. Be careful when gluing the nuts in place, as they might get stuck in the coupler sideways. If this happens, just quickly remove it before the glue dries, and then try to carefully place it back inside. With the nuts in place, the next step will be to glue the coupler into the bottom of the Palisman. We'll once again be using superglue for this. At last, we have arrived at the final stage, which is clear coating all the pieces. For this, we're going to start off with the Palisman section, but we'll be using the same process for all of the pieces. For our clear coat, we'll be using a semi-gloss polyurethane.